This video contains major spoilers for the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie. Hey guys, I'm really mad. Okay, mad is the wrong word. I have some feelings about the new Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Although this is actually not a review video. Not entirely anyways. As the title might suggest, this video is not even going to be uniquely about the movie. There is going to be a section later where I point out a lot of issues with it, and not even like personal issues, I mean actual plot holes I was able to pick apart while analyzing this film, because at this point, that's all I can analyze it for. I would have loved to come out of this movie ready to make another thematic and narrative analysis like I did for the first, but I just can't. There's nothing. I have no idea what the theme of this one is supposed to be. This one doesn't even have some sort of family theme. It's like an anti-family theme. But you know what this movie does have? Lore! Lore was and continues to be plastered all over the marketing for this movie. I mean, it's what FNAF as a franchise is most known for at this point. It's not exactly being commonly praised for its strong character writing and emotional narratives. It's known for being confusing and unsolvable, and I guess like memes and stuff. And when we got some early reviews from YouTubers who got to see it early, they said, hey, we get some lore answers in this film. So what did it answer? The Wizards aren't the classics? Okay, well that just requires entirely ignoring their UCN lines. People are now arguing that FNAF 2 takes place in 1982, and yes, I have unironically seen this despite the paycheck saying 1987. And of course, the upending of one of the most common beliefs across the entire community about the main character because he's now two characters and also evil. You know what this means? Fresh arguments for who knows how long about things we thought were part of the very foundation of what we knew about the story. Like, okay, maybe we were just wrong. Except the date of FNAF 2, I mean, it's on the paycheck. It is true that so much of FNAF's story and its characters have been pure headcanon. I guess we never technically knew that Charlotte was a benevolent spirit. I guess we never technically knew that Michael Afton didn't agree with his father. So sure, we can be wrong about anything because it all just comes from headcanon. But tell me, why is it that everything had to come from headcanon? You want to know why? You want me to tell you exactly why? It's not exactly being commonly praised for its strong character writing and emotional narratives. It's known for being confusing and unsolvable. Five Nights at Freddy's has never valued story. The plot, the timeline, and the characters have no solid ground to stand on because the lore being hidden and mysterious has always taken priority. We always have to go back and question things so that nothing is ever actually confirmed, and thus we are never actually going to have a story with things like a timeline of events and a protagonist with motivations. If Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are separate in the movies, does that mean it's the case in the games? Because at that point, how much carries over? Would that confirm Vanessa is also Afton's daughter in the games? Her father's name was stated to be Bill, after all. Are people ever going to come to an agreement on it? Is Scott ever going to bother to answer it? Or are the following arguments about it just going to keep FNAF relevant because we have accepted that the fans debating about his story is much more iconic than it actually having a story?
Wait, where are you from, bro?
Michael.
Michael?
He said he's from Michael.
I have seen some people say, to my surprise, that Michael Afton is their favorite character in this movie. But what exactly is his character, his motivation? Assumedly, he was desperate for his father's approval because he was rejected by him his whole life, due to Vanessa apparently being William's favorite, resulting in Michael turning out the way he did. And you know, this could make him a very compelling character if this was shown on screen. But you know what? That's exactly what FNAF fans are used to. For the past 11 years, this series has had its story take place off-screen or in vague hints through Atari minigames or secret tapes, and the community has just gotten used to the idea of having to fill in these gaps on their own, and has been made to believe that this is good storytelling. If you like Michael Afton in this movie for the reasons I stated, all the power to you. But it is factually because you have filled those gaps on your own, in your own mind, because you had to, because you have always had to. I could say that my perspective on Michael is that he literally just wants to kill people and uses William's legacy as an excuse, and William actually liked Michael more and just lied to Vanessa, and it couldn't be proven false. And people will say stuff like, well, you're just mad your headcanon got debunked, and will bring up something like this line from the Ultimate Guide that says the Aftons, plural, want Remnen, which would imply then that Michael was aware of what he was doing and actively chose and wanted to help William regardless. But why then was the entire community not suddenly on board with this being the idea behind his character? Because a singular line in a supplemental book is not enough and should not be enough to change and reshape the entire viewpoint of a major character when this motivation and idea is not baked into the actual narrative. I could have said, 2 years ago, that I believed Michael actually behaves the way he does in this movie, and everyone would have looked at me and called me insane, and they would have been right, because I would have no actual reason to believe that. Likewise, we never knew that he was regretful over the bite of 83 and was trying to make up for his wrongdoings and was seeking revenge against his father because we just never knew anything. The fact that so much about the very core of FNAF's main character, if he can truly be called the main character because who knows how many games he's technically in or how much relevance he technically has had to exist in headcanon for nearly a decade is a bad thing. Even in the movie, Michael is still not free of his backstory having to be up to interpretation. I'm aware it can be elaborated on in the sequel, but this is in reference to the fact that people have already said he's their favorite. Of course, I'm not suddenly asking for every piece of information to be handed to me on a silver platter, as if I don't recognize the importance of occasionally having to read between the lines. The show don't tell rule exists and is important, but it does not apply to entire characters, entire story beats, and if we really stretch it, entire story arcs. On a much smaller scale, FNAF was able to operate like this, but with much bigger productions like full-on 3D free-roam games from Steelwool, the original charm of FNAF shrouding its story in mystery is becoming its biggest issue now that the narrative is needed at the forefront. I'm not kidding when I say that Secret of the Mimic probably has one of my favorite stories in any Five Nights at Freddy's game to date, and by that I mean the tragic tale of Edwin, his son David, the creation of the Mimic, and the completely new take on Fiona instead of what her role was originally. I even have a whole separate video on my channel going over their arc, and what I found people were misunderstanding about it. And I guess I have to admit to you all that even at the time of making that video, I was not actually fully happy with how the game had turned out, and was starting to feel less enthusiastic about FNAF as a whole. Obviously, you would never know from the presentation, and I did have fun doing my analysis and explanation on it, but the fact that I had to sit there and explain what felt like elements that should have been at the forefront really did bother me. I think it's kind of insane that you could hypothetically do an entire playthrough of the game and never learn about the backstory behind what happened with Edwin and the Mimic at all, because everything is hidden away in tapes that you aren't actually required to listen to. And sure, people are encouraged to explore and try to look deeper, but even if you do that, you still don't get the full story. Like, how did David die? Why is the Mimic so full of rage? Because all the game offers is that it witnessed some sort of violence, but if you've read the short story, then you know there's way more to it than that. And yet this game deviates so hard from the rest of it that now we can't be sure of anything carrying over. My assumption, because I have to make the assumption, is that things like Edwin's emotions getting infused into the Mimic Endo is still the case. But at the same time, we could suddenly get a reveal someday that, the Mimic has no paranormal elements and everything it does is just a genuine malfunction in its programming, because nothing was ever technically confirmed, so a large chunk of what I like about the story and my entire analysis video gets thrown out the window. I'd be upset about it, and people will go, "You're just mad that your headcanon was wrong," as if the very foundation of a story having to exist in headcanon is a normal thing. Even something as simple as the context around David's death could be totally different here. They could even decide to go, "Oh, David didn't actually die, he was only kidnapped," because we just aren't able to trust the books anymore that were marketed as FNAF world building, the books that a vast majority of people only cared about because they thought they might contain major lore, and then entirely disregarded them if they didn't. And those who cared about them as actual stories with interesting concepts or themes and memorable characters are left to be laughed at for having thought that maybe storytelling or even experimentation was an aspect of FNAF that had equal value to it being something you can point at and go, hey, I know what that is. As you can probably tell, I have some opinions about how the whole book situation with FNAF has played out, but I would like to move on from that topic before it takes up too much of this video. However, there is one specific book, a specific guidebook that I think is worth bringing up here. Genuine question. Is this the only franchise where the guidebooks are not actually intended to guide you? For some reason, the book actually says that Secret of the Mimic is a direct sequel to the Tales from the Pizzaplex story, which isn't exactly possible due to major differences in the timeline. But maybe it's because it goes on to speculate about things as if the game isn't out yet. What? Who was in charge of the quality control here? Did they start writing certain sections before it was out and then just leave them in? To my memory, this book has never actually answered anything definitively in all of its iterations, opting to just go, well, fans speculate this and fans believe that, and will even suddenly stop and directly ask the reader what they think. How am I supposed to know the answer? You're the guidebook! Not only is this a guidebook that refuses to actually guide you, this is also a guidebook that will just straight up lie to you. And okay, I'm not actually salty about Chica's secret party existing. I get why people are excited about this, I get why it's fun, but let's take a step back here and look at this from an objective standpoint. There is an entire section within, let me reiterate, an official guidebook that talks about a game that does not actually exist. It pretends like it does for a joke? Is it a teaser? I have no idea. But this is only a concept that works for people who have not just been fans of this series for years, but have been part of the tight-knit community that understands this kind of tone and sense of humor from a man who used to release troll games with Freddy's face pasted over his old characters before releasing a game. But FNAF is not in that kind of state anymore. This, to me, is a sign of Scott forgetting to think outside of the community's reach and does not consider the effect or consequence of having a franchise that has gone mainstream. So some rando stumbles across this book and is gaslit into thinking there was an obscure minigame released back in 2016 on Scott Games that actually didn't. So what? Maybe they go on Reddit and ask people more about what this game is, since its claim that you can find more information about it on fan wikis is blatantly false. And they either learn that an official guidebook just outright lied to them for no reason, get laughed at by half the community calling them a dumbass for not understanding the joke, or continually gaslit by everyone responding because it's funny. The point is that this is creating a divide between fans and outsiders. Someone new wants to try and get into FNAF, wants to try and start understanding what the hell it's even about. They basically have no entry point, no game that actually spells out the story or timeline, no supplemental material that isn't an alternate universe, no explanation video that isn't biased, and even a guidebook, which you would expect to be a perfect place to start, is still not this for them. Having a "it's for the fans" mindset is fine, but eventually you have to realize that you do need to start trying to appeal to a broader audience as well. You can't keep putting all your eggs in one basket and trying to cater to the exact same circle of people when that circle is just inevitably going to get smaller. Like I said earlier, FNAF does not value story. It values its reputation of having lore so mysterious and hidden you can make 100 videos on it and still not get anything right. Now, ironically, I do think that the movies are kind of the opposite of this. They're actually fairly easy to follow, speaking in terms of lore, because the sequel especially is practically just exposition the movie. But does that suddenly fix all of FNAF's issues and make it good? Well, no. Because you still need a lot more than exposition to actually tell a good story. And you definitely need a lot more than references and iconography to make a good movie. Critics are not who we're listening to for this franchise. I think it's dangerous to listen to critics in general, even if they're saying stuff that you don't disagree with. But that's a really hard way to make a movie. It's almost like retrofitting or trying to anticipate someone's judgment. We are listening to the fans, and we always have been, and the sequel movie is focused on them. My hope is like with the first one that some other people wander in and stumble upon it and get excited about it as well. But we've known from the beginning that if we don't make these movies for the fans, if we don't make them marked for them, then we've lost the whole thing. You know, what's the point? This sequel is for the fans. We've been listening to what
and they would
probably
be terrible. You know, if I had the mindset that, oh, hey, it's Five Nights at Freddy's, people will love it, you know, regardless of quality, then we would already have several movies and they would all be terrible.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't see Freddy Fazbear on my screen and suddenly decided I had to love this movie regardless of quality because it's Five Nights at Freddy's. I really, really don't like the way they're trying to create this artificial divide between fans and critics as if they can't overlap. I'm a fan of FNAF and I didn't like this movie. Here I am making a video where I'm criticizing it. But the only criticism they seem to value is stuff like, you should put in more gameplay, or I want it to have more jump scares. But that kind of stuff is not what is most important to me. The Easter eggs are cool and all, but I care a lot more about things like how well the film is written and it not being riddled with plot holes. Should that just not matter to me? Do I have to like something just because it's FNAF or else I'm not a true fan? In the case of fans, criticism almost always comes from a place of love and wanting to see something improve. I've been following this series since 2014 and I was majorly excited back when the fact a movie was getting made was first announced. God, when was that? Before FNAF 4 even came out? I didn't want to dislike this movie. I want to see these movies do better. If I didn't, I wouldn't have bothered with an entire rewrite that I spent days on and will be talking about at the end of this video, so stick around for that, by the way. But I didn't do that out of spite or hatred. That was hours spent writing out of passion. If I hated FNAF, I would not have bothered making this video. I'm making it because I care enough about this series to do it. Before I get into what I like and don't like about the sequel, something funny I noticed is that it has a lot of aspects that are actually just copied from the first, and I don't think I've seen anyone else point it out. Let's go down the list. There's a group of people in an abandoned Freddy's location getting attacked and killed by the animatronics. Said animatronics are actually just being controlled or influenced by someone or something else. The villain of the movie only shows up once near the start and then again at the end. There is a twist where Vanessa is revealed to be related to that villain, and it's almost worded the exact same way.
His name is William Afton.
I'm Michael. Michael Afton.
The ending has the animatronics reawaken and start taking demands from the villain. And for a bonus, both movies end with an antagonist knocked out at Mike's house and no one seems to care. See, it's Five Nights at Freddy's 2, guys, so we gotta have themes of 2. Okay, but seriously, what did I actually like about this movie? Well, I do like Charlotte's death scene at the beginning, even if I think the way the parents behaved was way too over the top and ridiculous. But whatever, it's necessary for the plot. Vanessa having hallucinations of William at her spin class where he's shouting at her to go faster and Mangle being flung from the car and hitting Toy Freddy are fantastic scenes. I love them, seriously. That's the kind of campiness I enjoy in FNAF. In fact, when I first watched the spin class scene, I don't know how, but for just a split second I thought Spring Bonnie was on a bike when he first showed up, and that idea is genuinely hilarious to me, and I think they actually should have done that, no joke. I love Vanessa's nightmare sequence, I love the scene with Henry, and although I am not a fan of the idea of an animatronic battle in any FNAF media, I didn't like it in the Twisted ones and I didn't like it here, I can at least compliment how it looks cinematically. I just think it was really well shot, the way the suits are animated, the quick but precise movements, and the fact it was all stunts that had to be done practically. Like, just look at Toy Bonnie getting pulled through the window, and the way his face comes apart was probably took smashing at a very specific angle to then show the endo underneath. That's super impressive. And I guess that's about it. I really do wish I had enjoyed it way more than I did, but man, there is just so much wrong here. I had a whole list of issues already, and then every time I would have a discussion with my friends, it got even longer because we would just keep noticing even more that was wrong. So get ready, because I am telling you, you are not prepared for how long this list is. Starting off with a minor one, but what exactly did William do to the young boy at the beginning of the movie? He didn't stab him, he's just randomly lying unconscious on the floor and we don't actually know why. Did he just hit him on the head and knock him out? But why? Doesn't he plan to kill him anyways? Mike is never actually shown to be working a job in this movie. So how did he afford this new house? How can he afford to leave Abby a $20 bill for a pizza? Where is he getting all this money? This is an especially minor nitpick, but why is Jeremiah suddenly Mike's best friend? Did they know each other before Mike's job at the mall? And if they didn't, did Jeremiah watch Mike beat up an innocent man in front of him and suddenly decide he wants to be besties with this guy? This friendship obviously wasn't planned because Jeremiah is not mentioned ever again in the first movie. We're supposed to imagine they were close, and yet he's not on Mike's mind as someone he can turn to when he's in trouble. Again, this one is minor, but I bring it up because it'll be relevant to my rewrite later. Okay, so I guess what Mike was telling Abby is that he's going to fix her friends, but what he's hiding is that he can't because the animatronics are apparently missing. And yet we know they weren't because it's directly stated that they're not able to leave the pizzeria. And so if they were there when Abby looked for them or when Mike was calling to them, why did they not respond? Instead of waiting until they were seconds away from death. The puppet possession thing being fatal is not explained. Lisa dies from it, but Abby doesn't. I guess we have to assume it has a time limit? Okay, this one is genuinely insane to me. Mike finds Vanessa tied up at the pizzeria and does not question how she got into that situation. He's just like, what happened? Where's Abby? And completely brushes off the fact that Vanessa was tied up. There is no world in which you're not going to further question who did that and why. Mike complains like 3 times about the fact that he doesn't have doors to close, even though that was not something he did in the first movie. Why doesn't Vanessa stay if she knows the computer better while Mike is the one who goes out to look for Abby, you know, his little sister? Wouldn't it make more sense for this to be the other way around? And given that Vanessa was there, why did she not tell Mike about the mask? Like, she's basically just there to give exposition anyways, so why doesn't she say, by the way, that mask should stop anything that might see you, and that's why he says there's no way that'll work, because he's remembering what Vanessa told him. But no, that's not even the explanation. He just randomly looks at it and thinks that this will work against the animatronics while simultaneously thinking to himself that it's not going to work against the animatronics. Mike randomly deciding to decapitate Balloon Boy is pretty nonsensical when you think about it, but it's really funny to me, so I'll let it slide. Oh yeah, and he complains about no doors and then uses the vent cover as a door. And it works! Why in the world does Wither Bonnie just give up immediately and not try to break the vent a second time? Did he decide he was camera shy and that 23 seconds of screen time in the movie was long enough? Why do the animatronics have a built-in GPS system if they are not intended to leave the building? That is literally why the perimeter lock exists. The Faz Fest scene where the cosplayer says Toy Freddy looks fake and like a toy or whatever is exceptionally dumb when you consider that they should know these characters given that the toy animatronics are on the Faz Fest poster. How do they not look at him and see it as an immaculately perfect one-to-one replica of a real authentic Freddy Fazbear animatronic? These people are fake fans. Vanessa says Charlotte possesses people to move around, but we see her doing this just fine in Toy Chica, and regardless of being physically inside the suit, we also know she can just directly control the animatronics as vessels, so what is the actual point of the human possession? Speaking of the marionette being inside Toy Chica, why does it have to break open her chest to get out? How did it get inside in the first place? Aunt Jane helped bring FazFest into existence. Are you kidding? How does one singular woman, who did not witness anything that happened in the first movie other than a split-second encounter with Golden Freddy where he knocks her out, start spinning all these tales about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to the point almost an entire town of people all unanimously decide that this is the coolest shit ever for some reason and decide to make a celebration out of it? It is just not logical. I know the toys have their GPS stuff, so that's how Michael found Mike and Abby's house, but why do the classic animatronics know where Mike's new house is? Golden Freddy knew where they lived in the first movie, but that's because Abby was in contact with the spirits. In this movie, one of the recurring points is that she no longer has communication with them, so seriously, how did they know? This is something I would have never noticed had my friend not pointed it out. But at the end, when all the classic animatronics show up to take down the toys, you see Michael backing up towards the front door. And then you have the moment of Chica coming in and she's standing by that front door. And you can still see the spot where Michael should be as Chica destroys Toy Chica. And then in the next shot, Michael is standing there again and Chica is gone. This one isn't even a complaint, it's just really funny to me. He literally teleports. Either that or classic Chica is Michael Afton. And when he runs out the door, oh my god, I need to rant about this. Jeremiah sat there in his truck out in front of Mike's house and watched Michael and 5 animatronics enter the house and then watched 5 more break in and start fighting the other animatronics and sat and didn't do anything until Michael came running out, in which he just punches him in the face for no reason, because why would he know he had even done anything? He's the one who let him walk into the house in the damn first place. And then he sees the broken down animatronics in the house and acts surprised after he was the the one who sat there with a front row view as they all just walked inside and leaves the guy that he punched and must have just known was responsible for all of this unsupervised and lets him get away. And then the marionette takes control of Mike Schmidt's house and begins attacking the city.
Oh, it's me, Maddie. I'm in heaven now.
So sorry I died. I miss you so much.
I'm happy here, so I'm not coming home.
Okay, but in all seriousness, this next one actually does piss me off. Because what do you mean the missing children just move on? Is this something they could have just done the whole time, whenever they wanted? This was when I realized how little they mattered to this narrative and how big of an issue that is if this is a trilogy that is supposedly adapting the first 3 games. You're telling me the spirits of the kids William killed will be absent in the next movie, which is the adaptation of the game where you not only come face to face with the killer but set his victims free? One of the most emotionally compelling points of that original story is the fact that these kids are trapped. What kind of a story are we telling where helping the missing children move on is not one of the biggest goals and is not intended to be the big finale? And I'm not saying that deciding on a different direction and focusing more on how characters like Mike, Abby, and Vanessa have been impacted by William instead is a sin, but it upsets me because A, at that point at least stop pretending like these movies are adaptations of FNAF 1 to 3, which they already kinda weren't, but that's another discussion, and B, I do not think that there is any good reason for them to have moved on, and this decision feels so forced. They have this reasoning of like, the animatronics leaving the pizzeria causes them to break down and so it sets the souls free, but this has never been an issue for Golden Freddy, who was shown going outside in the first one without issue, so at the very least he does not have to move on but just chooses to do it anyway.
Come on, let's go. Where'd you go?
Even though it means that William will come back, and now everyone is left to deal with him as well as Michael and Charlotte, who are still active threats. I do not believe for a second that this is where Golden Freddy's story was supposed to end because we have no answers to things like why his face was pasted onto the drawing from the first movie or him outright being replaced by Garrett in Abby's drawing. We'll never know why he was special or stood out from the others, but who needs setup and payoff in a series where its entire identity is built on not knowing or understanding things, right? If the reasoning for this decision behind the scenes is that the child actors were aging, I don't think it would be a huge deal to just recast them or even get creative and come up with some sort of in-universe explanation. They're ghosts, man. Maybe their desire to grow up reflected in their appearance and they started to look old, or I don't know, just anything. Michael was, no duh, not planned at the time of writing the first movie, but I hate how we don't get any sort of explanation as to what he was doing during that time and why he wasn't relevant. I mean, how does he even know his father is dead? How does he know that Mike and Abby had a part in it? How does he even know Jane is their aunt? His inclusion in this movie isn't even explained well either. How long was he guarding that abandoned location and why? How does he even take control of the animatronics at the end? It says signal rerouting. Rerouting to what exactly? What does he have that controls them? How can he wirelessly connect to them? Why do they listen to verbal commands? Are they sentient? Toy Chica still talks to Abby after Charlotte is no longer in control. Did Michael tell her to say that? Did she say that all on her own? What the fuck is going on in this ending? And then Mike is mad at Vanessa for not having told him her entire life story, not about Charlotte or Michael, but he was the one who told her that he wanted them to move on, to the point he brushes off her valid concerns about Abby being in contact with her friends again, and wasn't taken seriously, so why would she have brought up those things, especially if she had no reason to believe they were going to become relevant? I know these can be intentional issues, and it's supposed to be an actual flaw with Mike's character, except that I am actually pretty sure we're supposed to be siding with Mike here, because before the movie came out, it was stated that Jeremiah was supposed to say what the audience thinks.
But your character is described as somebody, you just described him as this, he kind of speaks what the audience is thinking. And these are characters that I find people gravitate towards the quickest, because again, they're the proxy for the audience.
I say what the audience wants to say in that moment. You know what I mean? I provide that clarity.
And if we're supposed to be on his side and, he's on Mike's side, then I guess we're supposed to be opposed to Vanessa, and who knows? Maybe her getting possessed by Charlotte at the end is meant to be perceived as some sort of punishment for what she did wrong, which was nothing. Everything that plays out in this movie happens by complete coincidence. By coincidence, Lisa finds the music box and stops it. By coincidence, Charlotte kills everyone except Michael, who manages to get away. By coincidence, Abby finds the Faz Talker at the other location, which allows Charlotte to communicate with her. By coincidence, Mr. Berg breaks Abby's project so that Toy Chica can offer to be the replacement. By coincidence, Mike severed Charlotte's connection so that Michael can take over instead. And speaking of this Michael and Charlotte plot, was Charlotte being freed part of his plan or not? He can just control the animatronics anyways, so surely he doesn't need her. He does tell Lisa to ignore the music box and looks surprised at first when the lights start flickering, but he also smiles when he hears Lisa scream and again, does not seem afraid of being killed here, but is then targeted by the possessed Lisa, but once outside goes, "Welcome back, Charlotte," and smiles like he planned it? I do not get this at all. And then nothing actually gets resolved at the end. This movie sets up two different threats. The marionette who is possessing people and Michael who is planning to kill people. The movie ends with two different threats. The marionette who is possessing people and Michael who is planning to kill people. Great job, guys. I think including Michael Afton in this film was a mistake, and that the idea of this character existing here at all feels very pointless, but I'm not saying that I don't want him back in the next one. Now you have to bring him back and actually justify his existence. You want me to like this character's inclusion in the story? Fine then, convince me. Show me that you can do it. Lock in! I suppose I'm interested in seeing where they'll take the FNAF 3 movie. But in the same way, I can hardly refer to this one as a FNAF 2 movie because it doesn't even have Jeremy Fitzgerald. It's probably more appropriate to refer to the next as the third FNAF movie instead of the FNAF 3 movie. Because without the missing children, and instead we have a possessed version of Vanessa from Security Breach, Henry from FNAF 6, Michael Afton from Sister Location, and potentially the Fun Times ? We're hardly adapting that game, are we? I'm not opposed to including elements from all parts of the franchise, obviously, and in fact I think it's probably better to do that. But I think those elements should be adapted in ways that make sense where there's an understanding of why they worked originally.
Ooh! Ever since Secret of the Mimic, I've been asking myself what a good adaptation is. What I've concluded in the months following the game's release is that a good adaptation is one that clearly loves and respects its source material while also adding or changing elements to better fit the media, work better than what originally happens, or simply offer a new perspective without completely disregarding the source. Great movie adaptations I've watched recently are Superman, Frankenstein, The Long Walk, It, Welcome to Derry, and the two best adaptations I've seen with Misery and Stand By Me by the late Rob Reiner. The Five Nights at Freddy's franchise doesn't seem to agree, and instead all of their adaptations appear to follow the rule of cool instead. If you're a book fan like me, or alternatively a Bendy fan, you've suffered from this a bit with the graphic novel adaptations. Of the ones that blatantly change things to be cooler, I can only name two where this actually benefits the story, those being Hide and Seek and The Cliffs. The Breaking Wheel trades its claustrophobic and horrifying ending with Julius summoning metal tentacles and wrapping Reed up. Jump for Tickets adds Coils the birthday clown trapping Colton in the machine rather than poor judgment on Colton's part. Playfrophobia depicts Ballora as blatantly evil and ripping Grady apart instead of unintentionally breaking his bones. Just all strange changes made to be cool and not scary.
Good enough.
The films follow the rule that they're made for the fans, which is just the rule of cool in disguise. The only difference between the films and the graphic novels in terms of adapting is that the films seem to dump in a boatload of fan service, which I suppose is putting more love in than changing an ending to a story for no good reason. Now here may be my hottest take of all. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing for adapting Five Nights at Freddy's and some of its sequels. Keyword here being some, but I'll address that later. The first game does not have a narrative to it all that much. It's mainly just a ton of backstory from Ralph before his death. Thus, making a movie out of this game and making it for the fans really isn't an issue. There's a lot you can play with. So, does the rule of cool and things being for the fans work in this case? Well, I still can't fully praise this film from both a general movie and an adaptation standpoint. Even gameplay-wise, Mike never fully uses the cameras or doors, so it's already kind of failed as a FNAF film. With that said, I think the stuff it does adapt is done decently well sometimes. The usage of the drawings is very cool, although it being literal this time, whereas in the fourth closet it was more of a metaphorical representation of children's memories, is odd. And the animatronics turning on William is cool to see. I think I prefer it happening here than the third film too, as I've always liked the narrative of the third installment being one of the big boss battle between our unwilling protagonist and Springtrap, with the children's souls being more of a secondary plot. I do want to criticize one tiny thing, the usage of "I always come back." This line started out more infamous due to Ultimate Custom Night, but in recent times we seem to have forgotten what it means at all. William says this during the events of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, point in his undead life where he has survived the fire at Fazbear's Fright and has seemingly gotten over the hysterical state Springtrap has suggested to initially put him through. Now he's cocky, truly believing he cannot die and he is untouchable. This is exactly why William knowingly enters the trap. He was overconfident and interested in where it was going. So why on earth does he say, "I always come back," when he is dying before our very eyes in the film? That's another thing people seem to forget. William does die upon being Springlock, and he isn't sure he'll come back. In every single adaptation, he is mortified by the things going off. As far as he knows, this is it. This is his final moments, and he's failed to achieve the immortality he dreamed of. William is not in any position to be acting cocky in the film. But whatever, this is a minor complaint and not something I truly care about that much. What I do care a lot about is everything done in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. When I said some of FNAF's sequels work with the rule of cool and prioritizing fanservice in an adaptation, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is a major exception. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 kind of falls into the same boat as the first game, where the main gameplay doesn't fully have a narrative, so the approach could still work. Although with the things this film seems to build up, I'm not exactly sure that they'll pull it off. But 2, and everything after 3, has a narrative it's trying to tell with/during its gameplay. I won't dive too deep into FNAF's 2 story in this video, but almost none of that narrative is present in this movie, and I cannot in good faith call this a faithful or good adaptation as a result. Instead, FNAF 2 seems to prioritize dumping nonsense fan service down the audience's throat. Literally nobody gave a fuck when Doug had that Avengers type reveal. I was dying. And adapting the gameplay rather than the story. That is one thumbs up I'll give. That was kind of fun. So what about the other things FNAF 2 does adapt? Well, they still aren't great, and there's two specifically that really grind my gears. I'm going to talk about Charlotte first because I'm a bit sick of the alternate universe excuse people come up with her. I get, like, wanting to defend these movies if you're having fun with it. But if Spider-Man started stabbing random civilians in a movie, people would be pissed. Charlotte is adapted horribly in this movie, far worse than any other character by far. Even cast reviews talk about how she's supposed to be portrayed, which is the complete opposite of how she is in the film. Here, Charlotte is a spirit stuck in a rage who seeks to hurt grown-ups because of the way they treated her before she died. Now, this could be an interesting direction if they kept literally any part of her personality and role intact. Charlotte in the films is not someone who lifts spirits in her arms, and she does not act more aware than the rest. If anything, her attitude is far more animalistic than that of the blonde boy. She isn't a protector of the innocent or anything, and majority of her plans hinge on manipulating, possessing, and more than likely killing some random 11-year-old girl she doesn't know. It's just so wildly out of character what little character Charlotte does have that I question if Scott saw the negative reactions to him making the ghosts nicer in the first film and figured we wanted them to act all homicidal. But you know what really grinds my gears? The Withered animatronics. I've seen way too many YouTubers say the way this film portrays these characters is lore. It's not. It's in blatant contradiction with the lore. Part of the misdirection in the game is that we're meant to believe the Wizards are the classic animatronics from the first game, now in disarray as the company has abandoned them. Of course, at the end of the game, we learn that it's a prequel and those animatronics are from an even older location, but are now becoming those classics we go up against in the first game. So, why on earth are they two separate animatronics in the film? If you're so dead set on this second installment being a true sequel, you could have simply written that they're the same animatronics still. come up with some nonsense excuse, if you so want to, as to why they look different, make the mixed direction true in the films while giving them more than their combined screen time of 1 minute and 49 seconds. But no, we gotta have our Twisted Ones moment at the end because it's for the fans. And in the Twisted Ones, it's the classics that kill the Twisteds. Well, Mr. Coffin, you're looking at your biggest Buck fan right here. You even plagiarized the work I've done in the FNAF Wiki for your horrible little guidebook. And guess what? I'm not impressed by your shitty recreation of one of the few whatever moments in the worst of the 3 books.
I'm getting this weird feeling that you're angry.
Anywho, those are probably my 2 biggest complaints, adaptation-wise, but there's still more I want to address. Like how now there's 2 of them! Michael Afton feels like a last-minute change, and I'm almost certain this was originally meant to be Springtrap, and that there was going to be a twist or something where the marionette was mostly innocent and it was him controlling the animatronics like in the Twisted Ones. I do, however, still believe Michael's inclusion is part of their novel adaptations, and that he's replacing Elizabeth, and I am not looking forward to wherever they take him with that in mind, as Elizabeth Afton is objectively one of the best antagonists this franchise has come up with. If only people didn't sum her up as Hot Baby. Seriously, I had to remove blatantly false info from the wiki because of that initial reception to her. It was not fun. So far, they've already screwed up, as they've established Michael's goal is to continue William's legacy, which is a very surface-level understanding of Elizabeth and not a proper reflection of her character. So, fun for me. With that said, I do think there is one character who's being adapted very well in both of these films.
What did you get? You got a white woman!
Vanessa has always been one of my favorites since the first film and its novelization dropped, and while I fucking despise the way this film and a good chunk of the fandom treat her, I do respect that her character is still mostly accurate to the games. She is a victim of abuse, heavily tormented by her father to a point where he haunts her mind constantly, which is exactly what the Mimic is taking advantage of as Glitch Trap. When Vanessa tries seeking help through therapy, someone else is coincidentally seeing that therapist and ends up killing them due to how close they are to figuring out their misdeeds, leaving poor Vanessa still in anguish. I don't mind that the therapy and Gregory aspects aren't being adapted. Honestly, I'm glad that Punk isn't in these films yet at all. I also think the approach they take with Vanessa using Mike's method of dreaming to confront her trauma is a nice replacement. If it was used more, at least. I will say I don't care much for the Vanny aspect of her character beyond that messed up manipulation Glitch Trap has over her, but I am curious to see if the third installment changes things a bit based on her being possessed by Charlotte instead. The Vanny on it.
You and me together.
I'm sure there's more I could discuss, but I'm planning a deep dive on my own time later, so for now, I'll let my pal Puppy get back to yapping. Besides, I'm still trying to work out how to best record my own audio and video stuff. In fact, I'm not too sure how well this audio is going to come out as I'm writing this part, so sorry if I was a bit unbearable. Anywho, your best friend William B.A. has to go for now, but I'll be back later.
I am of the belief that there are a lot of elements in this film that actually could have worked. I don't think rewriting this movie would require throwing out every single idea it had and starting from scratch. I just think the way the plot incorporates everything is really messy, and it feels like these concepts were part of a checklist that was formed first, and then a narrative attempting to combine them was formed after, instead of having a narrative set up first and then letting everything else follow that. And since I don't want to just sit here and claim this is the case without being able to show that, as I stated before, I sat down and actually rewrote the movie. The first and easiest change I made. There's a completely new plot point introduced at the start in relation to Mike and ties directly back to the events of the first movie in order to justify this one's existence as its sequel, and when I get to it you'll see why it makes so much sense as the new direction for this film. The hardest change. I decided to have the movie follow a 5-night structure like the first, which was exceptionally frustratingly difficult and most certainly not necessary, but I wanted to see if I could actually do it. I do not believe that this rewrite is perfect, and that if I was given the proper time and had the brainpower to really refine and flesh it out, it probably could have been better. But I don't have that kind of time, so while I am happy with it, the end product in my eyes is just good enough. The third thing I need to mention, and I need to preface this with the fact that I did not go down without a fight, and I had several ideas for how I could try and do it, and all of them failed, but in the end I could not incorporate Freddy Carter into my rewrite. I am sorry, I tried. I really did try. But I realized that he is the one thing I cannot force in here. His inclusion was just not necessary and I couldn't justify it. There are remnants of one of the ideas I almost went with that I'll talk about after, but for now, here is my rewrite of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Minus Freddy Carter. Oh, another additional note, I would probably do the exact same cold open with Charlotte's death because I do think it was the perfect start to the movie. So yeah, I would keep that, no notes, except tone down the acting of the parents just a little bit. About a year after the events of the first movie, Mike is currently a suspect in the disappearances of his hired babysitter Max, his Aunt Jane, his career counselor Steve Raglan, and the stabbing of Vanessa, who has refused to testify against him but has not stated what actually happened either. But due to a lack of sufficient evidence, Mike has not been arrested or charged. Like in the movie, Vanessa is trying to live a normal life while suffering from recurring nightmares, but Mike too is struggling because of the talk of the town being that he's a murderer who killed his aunt in order to escape a child custody dispute and inherit her house. Abby is having a hard time too with being an outcast at school because of her brother's reputation, and so she spends her time missing her ghost friends and drawing them as her classmates instead. At the old pizzeria, a crew of Fazbear workers end up discovering Jane's body alongside the bodies of Max and 3 others, more than Mike was even thought to be responsible for. It is determined through forensics that the timeline of their deaths aligns with when he was working at the location, and so this is enough evidence for Mike to finally be apprehended. While he's under arrest, Vanessa can't just suddenly take care of a child full-time, so Abby is now being taken care of by a part-time babysitter named Lisa, who has a side job as a paranormal investigator and listens very enthusiastically to Abby's stories about what happened at Freddy's. Meanwhile, inside of an unknown house, there's a mysterious man watching TV, it's just Henry, and sees the news that there's a plan for a grand reopening of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This new location is an attempt by Fazbear Entertainment to revive itself after interest in Freddy's was reignited due to the collapse of the old building last year. They're refurbishing a building that was found still intact and are updating the location's animatronics to be shiny and new again and include facial scanning linked to a criminal database so that history won't repeat itself. Now that the hype for Freddy's is returning, suddenly people at school are interested in Abby and want to hear about her stories and hang out with her. Vanessa bails Mike out of jail because, well, 1, she knows he's innocent, and 2, to inform him of Fazbear's plan to reopen a location with what they're now calling the toy versions of Freddy and his friends. But Vanessa knows these as the first iterations of these characters that her father built, and lately her nightmares had involved her seeing their blueprints in his workshop. Could this just be a coincidence, or is it a warning of some kind? Lisa, who is now relieved of her babysitting duties, has researched the hell out of Freddy's after what Abby told her, and decides she wants to go ghost hunting one night with her friends at this new pizzeria before it officially opens, since she knows it's actually a redecorated version of the very first location, and is likely haunted by a girl who is rumored to have died there. There isn't a night guard here because the animatronics are considered advanced enough to look after the location themselves, which is a callback to Phone Guy saying that they should be the ones guarding you or whatever. The animatronics, functioning as they should, activate when Lisa and the gang break in and politely tell them they need to leave. They do hesitantly agree before suddenly the animatronics turn aggressive out of nowhere and begin attacking. Alex dies the same way as he does in the movie, Lisa just dies to another toy animatronic, it doesn't really matter who, and Rob, listen, I do not think this is how Rob should have died at all. I don't care about the puppetlings getting to kill someone, I don't even know what these things are, but I do love that the community has called them puppetlings and I'm using that name. There's a later scene where Balloon Boy is in the same river and doesn't actually get to do anything. In the first movie, the cupcake was a menace. It got to kill Carl, attack Mike, and even deliver the finishing blow on William Afton himself. Balloon Boy is the little guy, kind of this movie, and what does he get? Decapitation. He never gets a single attack in. He never gets his moment to shine. So I am completely changing the scene and having Balloon Boy be the one who kills Rob, just absolutely disintegrating him with his little propeller that is spinning at impossibly intense speeds. We did not question why the cupcake had razor blades in his mouth, so we're not questioning why Balloon Boy's hat can do that. He just deserves more than what the movie gave him, so he gets this kill in my rewrite because I will not allow the cupcake to outperform him. I know the puppetlings are also little guys, but they're not characters that previously existed, and so I don't care about them. Justice for Balloon Boy. The marionette was still slumbering downstairs while all of this chaos was ensuing, before the blonde ghost boy, I really wish he had a name by the way, appears beside the tiny music box and turns it off to awaken Charlotte. The next day, a position opens up to be the night security guard at the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which ends up being taken by none other than Jeremiah. Because if you're not going to give me my Jeremy Fitzgerald, then I'll just do it myself. He meets up with the manager of this location, who is Mr. Berg. Mr. Berg explains that they've ended up having trouble with break-ins and cannot rely entirely on the animatronics taking care of the problem. He warns him that the animatronics may act a bit strangely because they actually have parts of some older models who are known to move around in the night. Those older models come from the other building, which they attempted to repair and use first before making a discovery that made them abandon that operation before moving here. All of the animatronics from both locations are tied to the same perimeter lock system, which forces them to shut down if they leave the building. So those old ones which were moved here to be used for spare parts don't need to be worried about since they can't activate as long as they are no longer in their assigned pizzeria. Jeremiah gets the basic rundown of using the mask and he'll be ready to go for tonight. At school, Abby's popularity is continuing to increase because of her association with Freddy's, and she gets invited by some friends to go to a fan event set up by Fazbear Entertainment called FazFest to celebrate the grand reopening. Mike is still uneasy about anything related to Freddy's, but Abby begs him to let her go, to which the compromise is that he at least takes her himself. She meets up with her friends who look at her a bit weirdly when they realize who she's with, but they still have fun together playing games, signing up for a mailing list, and looking at some old relics on display. One of those items turns out to be the Faz Talker, which begins speaking to Abby when her friends walk away. It tells her that it needs her help, so Abby makes sure no one is looking before slipping it into her bag and then heading home. At home in her room, Abby is told through the Faz Talker that her friends, her ghost friends, need her help with something. Abby is willing, but also wants something in return. She talks about how her brother has been wrongfully charged for crimes he did not commit after the discovery of the bodies at the other Freddy's, and she wants help finding a way to prove him innocent. The Faz Talker goes silent. It's nighttime, and Vanessa is having another one of her nightmares. As usual, she's running from her father and ends up in his workshop. This time, though, instead of just blueprints, what she sees is the beginning of the actual construction of the toy animatronics. Not just that, hidden away in the corner of the room is the same box she keeps hidden in her closet full of items from Afton's victims, since I think we can safely say that's what that is. And then she catches a glimpse of the marionette. Meanwhile, Jeremiah has started his job as a night guard, and Mr. Berg was right. The animatronics are moving and seem to constantly want to approach his office, but with the use of the mask, he can get rid of them just fine and does not perceive himself to be in any real danger. The next day, Mike is doing some research online about the history of Fazbear Entertainment and manages to learn of the existence of Charlotte, a young girl who supposedly died in an accident that shut the first Freddy's down, the same Freddy's that is being reopened. Instantly, he confronts Vanessa about this, who reluctantly admits that she knew and was friends with Charlotte, but using a music box she got from Charlotte's father was able to put her spirit to sleep, which was inside of the marionette. As long as that music box is not disturbed, then everything should be completely fine. But this is not good enough for Mike, who is worried they are also going to reuse the marionette as part of the show when they reopen for the first time today. Vanessa really does not want to, but now that he knows she was Charlotte's friend, Mike drags her along to Freddy's to check. However, they barely get inside before something extremely obvious happens. Mike is instantly detected as a criminal. He is not allowed to enter the premises and is escorted out while Vanessa follows because she refuses to go without him. After they've gone, the Fazbear workers are approached by a mysterious man, aka Henry, who asks to speak to the owner of this establishment. Come nighttime, Abby is in bed sleeping when she is awoken by the sound of the Faz Talker. She finally has confirmation that her friends will help prove her brother innocent, but she needs to come to the new location. Mike ends up waking up and seeing a note on the door that says "Gone to prove your innocence." In Vanessa's dream, she once again sees the toy animatronics in William's workshop, who are even further constructed than they were before. She gets woken up by a phone call from Mike, who tells her Abby is missing. Mike and a still hesitant Vanessa head to Freddy's and sneak in through a window, landing in a storage room where they see the withered animatronics. Mike nor Vanessa recognize them and warily make their way past them while hoping they're not going to suddenly come to life. The two split up, and despite trying his best, it isn't long before Mike ends up being spotted by a toy animatronic who blares its alarm and alerts Jeremiah. Jeremiah recognizes Mike from their previous job together, and assumes he was probably charged for beating up an innocent man in a water fountain. He threatens to call the cops before Vanessa suddenly appears with Abby at her side. Realizing a child had been lost in the location and he's responsible, Jeremiah briefly becomes apologetic and will let this incident slide this time, but does not want to see them back here again. Mike tries to scold Abby for sneaking out, but she seems to be barely listening and is behaving completely differently. The next day, Abby is complaining that she wants to go to Freddy's because she promised to meet some friends from school there. Mike won't let her go alone, but can't take her because of the whole criminal detection situation. He encourages Vanessa to go instead to try and investigate the music box and the marionette while she's there. Vanessa finally obliges, and when she arrives with Abby, who meets up with her friends, a showtime performance begins, with the trapdoor slowly beginning to open. This sends Vanessa into a panic because of the memory of Charlotte's death, but the marionette does not rise out. Mr. Berg is furious over an animatronic being missing and his employees being unable to explain where it went. Vanessa realizes she has lost sight of Abby and begins desperately searching for her, asking around if anyone has seen her, until someone finally points and Vanessa sees that Abby is there, safe and sound. She tells Vanessa she was just saying goodbye to her friends because they had to go home. Vanessa reports to Mike that Charlotte is missing, and that alone confirms someone tampered with the music box, but because of the perimeter lock, she shouldn't be able to leave the building, and doesn't believe that she could have found another way. Vanessa thinks Charlotte is probably out for revenge for her death, and they vow to stay away from Freddy's for now, but are unsure how to warn anyone else. Mike remembers Vanessa mentioning Charlotte's father and wonders if he's out there somewhere and could be of any help, but has no idea how to go about contacting him. That night, as Abby is being tucked into bed, she suddenly mentions an address. Mike is confused as to what she's talking about or why it's important, but Abby claims to have heard a voice say it to her during her night at Freddy's. Jeremiah, as usual, is fending off against the toy animatronics, but swears he can hear their voice boxes glitching every time they're close to his office, like they're trying to speak to him. In Vanessa's nightmare, the toys have been fully built inside of William's workshop. They begin to activate before Vanessa is grabbed from behind by William and then wakes up, and is unable to fall back asleep for the rest of the night. Vanessa gets a call from Mike the next day asking if she can stay at his house and wait for Abby to get off the bus in case he isn't back in time, as there's something he needs to check out. Mike then drives off to the address that Abby gave him and ends up meeting Henry. Henry admits to the fact he is Charlotte's father and was even William's business partner and knows about the heinous acts he has committed. Mike chimes in with the fact that he is being accused of some of William's crimes when he was working at Freddy's, and Henry is pretty easily willing to believe he's telling the truth. All of Fazbear Entertainment is scummy, and Mr. Berg, who he met up with earlier that week, is exactly the kind of person he had predicted. He just wants money and wouldn't listen to Henry's warnings about reviving the brand. So Henry's plan is to start hanging up posters slandering their name and trying to get people to open their eyes. Through this, maybe the truth about Mike could even come to light. Meanwhile, at the pizzeria, a young girl named Debbie is upset because she can't be entered into the mailing list due to an unspecified glitch in the computer. Toy Bonnie is nearby and overhears her complaining. He apologizes to her, saying a part of his system was malfunctioning and interfering with the whole network. But if Debbie tells a worker to enter the code 4AE7XCD1 into the computer, it can fix him. At Mike's house, Vanessa had fallen asleep but is startled awake by Abby, who has just gotten home from school. Vanessa is sure it's because she's just awoken from another nightmare, but something about Abby seems strangely unsettling to her. Mike then arrives and tells Vanessa about a plan to start hanging up posters around town. Abby says she is too tired to join and wants to take a nap instead. Later on, Mr. Berg ends up seeing some of the posters that are hung up and he is pissed. He starts tearing them down and yelling at people passing by to ignore them, to which they stare at him like he's crazy. There's no real reason for this scene, it's just funny to me when I picture it in my head. In the evening, after Vanessa has gone home, Mike notices how some of the posters are torn down. But more importantly than that, some new posters have been hung up. Missing posters. More specifically, missing child posters. Mike heads home to call Henry and see if he was aware of this. And not only has Henry been keeping tabs on the situation since he learned of it after Mike left, but he's noticed something exceptionally strange. All of the homes of the missing children form a line that starts at the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and leads straight to Mike's house. Mike drops the phone and rushes to Abby's bedroom to see what he feared most. Abby is missing. At Vanessa's house, she gets the second call that week that Abby is gone. But not only Abby, multiple children have gone missing from the town. Mike knows that it's all linked back to Freddy, so he's heading there and getting to the bottom of this no matter what. As soon as Vanessa hangs up the phone, before she can even decide what to do, she is suddenly grabbed from behind. Abby, now in her full possessed marionette form, reveals her true self to Vanessa, telling her she finally has the answer she was looking for. Although William Afton is locked away in a hidden room trapped inside of the rotting spring Bonnie suit, his spirit found a way to project itself and begin using the toy animatronics as vessels. How? Vanessa's nightmares. There is an abundance of negative emotional energy every single time Vanessa dreams about her childhood trauma that William has been using to energize his soul, attaching to the memories of the toy animatronics and manifesting inside of them. Now that Charlotte knows this, she knows how to fix it, by killing the source, Vanessa. Vanessa had been so afraid of confronting the marionette because she knew Charlotte was going to be vengeful against her for not telling her the truth about her father as a child, so it comes as a surprise when Charlotte then offers a secondary solution. Charlotte has a power to put other people to sleep for as long as she wants, and she will use this on Vanessa in order for her to confront her father one last time and sever his connection herself from inside her mind, but she is given a time limit. If Vanessa fails, Charlotte will kill her at 6 a.m. Mike sneaks into Freddy's yet again in search of Abby, but immediately notices something off. The withered animatronics are not in the storage room. This time, Jeremiah finds him almost instantly, revealing that he had requested security cameras to be installed, so he was able to quickly spot Mike on the cameras. Before Jeremiah even has the chance to get mad, heavy footsteps are heard approaching them, and Mike immediately looks for a place to hide. But what he ends up accidentally uncovering is 3 bodies that had been hidden away inside the storage room: Lisa, Alex, and Rob. It's funny because this is the second time Mike ends up finding the dead body of Abby's babysitter at a Freddy's location. Jeremiah, seeing for the first time that these animatronics have actually killed people, is instantly horrified and finally fearing for his life. The two try to make a run for it but encounter the activated withered animatronics who slowly push them towards the office. Mike and Jeremiah have no choice but to work together in fending them off. So now we have that scene from the movie but extended with 2 guards and security cameras. Oh, and a cameo of the giant floating golden Freddy head because I think the film needed that. It's really important to me. Out in town, the toy animatronics have escaped the pizzeria and are wreaking havoc while the public watches. They smash windows and enter houses as they make their way to their destination, Mike's house. While Vanessa sleeps, the Charlotte-possessed Abby continues to loom over her, slowly getting closer and more menacing as time runs out. Inside of her nightmare, for the first time, Vanessa has the goal of trying to confront her father instead of just running from him like she always does. So I think this particular dream sequence is going to play out almost exactly as it does in the movie, except when William falls, he's actually dead. This shuts down the toy animatronics who, despite making it to their goal, found that no one was inside the house and had not actually caused any harm aside from property damage and mental scarring on innocent bystanders. Come 6 a.m., Freddy's is surrounded by the press as a fuming Mr. Berg approaches, yelling about having an incompetent night guard who let the animatronics escape. He goes on camera stating that this was just a glitch with the new robots and they'll scrap them and use the older models, until Jeremiah steps in and says he spent the whole night fending off those older models who were attacking him. Mr. Berg just scoffs at this claim and walks inside to prove that they aren't, showing the cameras how the animatronics are just standing around and aren't even activated. That is, until one moves and it startles him and... Okay, I knew I wanted Mr. Berg to receive some sort of retribution here for his behavior throughout the movie, and if it wasn't obvious, covering up the deaths of Lisa and her friends so the location wouldn't be shut down. So I asked my friends what would be just the most ridiculous, over-the-top death possible, and what we came up with is that the boats in the ride are gasoline-powered, and Mr. Berg, while stumbling backwards, accidentally knocks over a can beside the river into a boat which he lands in. A puppet wing, which is battery-powered, falls off the wall onto the start button of the boat, which we'll just pretend is there, and short-circuits, setting it on fire. The boat takes off down the river with Mr. Berg inside, who is engulfed in flames and screaming, traveling nearly half the length of the river ride before he manages to jump out into the water, except that the puppetling was also propelled off of the boat into the water, which has electrified it, and Mr. Berg ends up being electrocuted to death in front of everyone who just watches this happen. Mike, after having witnessed the most bizarre chain of events in his entire life, realizes that he still doesn't know where Abby is. The last place he can check is the basement where the music box should be, so he manages to slip away and find his way down there. He sees that the big music box is open and peers inside, where he finds every single missing child from town sleeping peacefully. The ghost children appear behind Mike and tell him that the children have been kept safe here while their plan was unfolding. Mike connects the dots that the withered animatronics are the same animatronics from the other pizzeria, but he doesn't understand why they acted aggressively. All he gets in response is "we know how to pretend," before the children in the music box begin to stir awake. After being checked over, a little malnourished but otherwise unharmed, the children are reunited with their parents, while Mike gets to reunite with Abby, the real Abby, who has retained her memories of her time being possessed. The plan was that the toys would end up leaving the pizzeria, who would be seeking Mike and Abby while under William's control. The mailing list is how we knew where they lived, but also how the spirits knew where all the other children lived who were in that line of danger, and were lured to the music box by Charlotte to be put to sleep and kept there in the meantime. The withered animatronics, being able to activate due to William getting the perimeter lock shut down, distracted Jeremiah and doubly Mike while the toys escaped. Their pretend aggressive behavior, which was caught on the security cameras, will be pinpointed as the source of the problem with the toys, whom they were used for as spare parts. Now all of the robots are perceived as dangerous, the location will shut down, and everyone will know what really caused the deaths at Freddy's last year, being the deadly animatronics who belonged to that location, proving that Mike is innocent. The entire plot was basically just Charlotte and the MCI playing 4D chess against William Afton. So with that, Mike's charges are dropped, Freddy's is shut down again, and all of the animatronics are scrapped. This technically leaves it open-ended on if this sets the spirits free or not, but I think it should be pretty obvious that it didn't, not in my rewrite, and Mike will have to learn they're still around in the sequel and then set them free for good. Mike also notes that the ghost children somehow looked older, like they were Abby's age, and this is tied back to the fact that Abby had been drawing them growing up with her as her friends at school, which had an actual impact on their appearances. There, see? Didn't need to recast them. I solved it. It was that easy. And of course, for some proper setup for the third movie, Abby tells Vanessa that Charlotte wanted her to know, now that William cannot use her emotion to energize his spirit and project it, he will be looking for another way to come back. The marionette itself has been left at Vanessa's house after unpossessing Abby to leave that open-ended too, and I think it'd be cool if the final shot was of it lying inside of the box in Vanessa's closet, holding onto the items from all the other victims, but added to that pile is Charlotte's music box. Okay, that's it. A few additional explanations because I want to shed light on some characterization and leave no room for plot holes. The MCI were dormant up until they could sense William's spirit in the toy animatronics in the new location. After being awoken, they sense yet another spirit sleeping downstairs, who the blonde kid wakes up to see what her deal is and if she wants to help them figure out and stop whatever's going on. Charlotte learns about Abby through the MCI and how she freed them from William's control. So Charlotte believes she could be the key to stopping him again and reaches out to her through the Fat Stalker, but Abby ends up talking about the situation with Mike and how she wants to prove him innocent. Charlotte only really cares about stopping William and protecting other children, which she doesn't think the parents are capable of doing, but agrees to the MCI's proposal that they simultaneously help Mike because it is kind of their fault for the crimes he's suspected of, and he too helped Abby break William's control and they want to make it up to him. The MCI are not fully on board with Charlotte's idea of possessing Abby instead of just telling her the plan, but she wants to take the lead here. She has inherent trust issues and doesn't believe in asking for help since she asked for it and received none at the time of her death. This plan is not shared with Vanessa and Mike either, the former who she still holds a bit of a grudge against, and the latter, despite hearing good things from the MCI, still being an adult and thus deemed untrustworthy. In Vanessa's dream, she witnesses an omen for the MCI and Charlotte, who are now officially getting involved. The explanation for the toy animatronics approaching Jeremiah's office is that they want to force him to type the code into the computer that will disable the perimeter lock, but William does not have enough control for them to not end up fooled by the game mechanics, nor can he make them speak clearly. When Vanessa falls asleep while waiting for Abby, William can then take control and make Toy Bonnie ask Debbie to have the worker type the necessary code. The MCI make note of this, Charlotte sees that Vanessa was asleep, and can finally make the connection as to how William has returned. Something obvious to note, once Charlotte possesses a human, she can just leave the building and the perimeter lock no longer affects her, because I think it's still somehow having an effect after human possession in the movie is kind of nonsensical and dumb. I also didn't like the idea that Charlotte did not care at all about who actually killed her and was just vengeful against all parents, so I changed her motivation here to be about stopping William and protecting children first, and then just not caring about what happens to the adults at all. Like, if William did successfully make Jeremiah type the code, he probably would have just killed him afterwards, so he was in danger that whole time and she just didn't give a fuck. And of course, she still ends up being willing to kill Vanessa, but under a completely different context. And I don't know what Vanessa getting possessed at the end is going to mean for the next movie. I mean, I seriously don't know, because can't they just use the music box again? But for the sake of not hindering the quality of what I'm writing currently, because I'm focused too hard on what follows it, I just didn't bother. Maybe when the next movie comes out, I'll make a rewrite that follows the plot of what I wrote here. Could genuinely be interesting. Okay, why was Freddy Carter not in this rewrite? Well, one of my older ideas was that while William Afton was projecting his spirit due to being trapped inside the Spring Bonnie suit, he would specifically manifest as a younger version of himself that pretended to be a guard and lured people to the location. His young self would be played by Freddy Carter, even though they don't exactly look anything alike. But this just didn't mesh well with the rest of what I wanted to do, especially if he was just going to have control of the toy animatronics anyways. And as I pointed out with Charlotte, if they're already being used as vessels, then doing anything else becomes pointless. Then I was like, what if Charlotte and William are fighting for control of the toys, and that's why Charlotte has to resort to possessing people and William has to resort to manifesting physically? Because neither can rely on having full control of the toys. And I played around with that idea, and then other things fell apart, and man, writing is hard, guys. Like I said, if I had the time, I could not only improve what I have, but I could probably write a whole multitude of ways to redo this movie that I think would work a lot better. You could almost put this explanation right into the movie as is, that Michael and Charlotte were locked in a battle over whose turn it is to control the deadly robots, and both parties are being forced to find alternative ways to complete their goal, and it would barely require tweaking the rest of the plot. There are just such better ways of executing certain plot points that would fill in the plot holes and make more sense narratively, but it's like they just didn't care. Even in my rewrite, I don't think the concept of Michael Afton has to be entirely thrown out. Maybe we see him as a child in one of Vanessa's nightmares as set up for a reveal in the next movie or something, I don't know. But I just don't think fully introducing him and making him part of the plot fits in this movie. Because in this movie, in the actual movie, his involvement is basically just pointless. Lisa and the others could have broken in and been killed by the toy animatronics without him being there, and we don't need this big moment where he takes control of the toys because we already had an antagonist who had control over the toys, Charlotte. It would be different if the twist at the end is that Charlotte was actually innocent all along or something, but no, her goal was also to kill people, so what is the point? Michael didn't do anything in this entire film. He didn't control the animatronics before this point. He says FazFest wouldn't have existed without Jane anyways, so what does his entrance even reveal? The big twist at the end of the film is that Vanessa has a brother. That's our big reveal. Ignoring this from a lore standpoint, from an actual narrative standpoint, that has got to be the most anticlimactic plot twist of all time. His only real purpose at all is to make Mike mad at Vanessa at the end and abandon her so that she can end up being possessed, but that's literally it. And so I decided to replace him with William in my rewrite because then I have a way to give plot relevance to Vanessa's nightmares and she has them every night, which in turn allows her to parallel what Mike was going through in the first film. I know earlier I was like, this plot is almost just copied from the first one, but with this particular case I think it makes sense to do that because this movie is about her confronting her past trauma after Mike got his turn last time. It's all about having an actual reason to do it. As for the other changes and why I think they're better, Mike being a suspected criminal is an obvious one. I have no idea why they didn't do this. The setup was already there. Multiple people associated with him either die or are injured in the same week, including a police officer, and then you could use that to tie into the toys having a criminal database like in the games, for some additional fan service that could have actually been plot relevant. Like, come on, it was right there! The movie never shows Mike working a job, and I just didn't really bother to do that either, as long as I explained how he has a new house, which is that he inherited it from Jane because he's like her last remaining family or whatever, then that's good enough for me. Abby letting the popularity get to her head a bit, I think is a much better reason for why she loves talking about Freddy's at school and generally not having an aversion to the brand after what she went through in the first movie. I decided to actually have the pizzeria be reopened because I think it's just the more interesting way to shake up the plot with getting to see a location while it's active and of course allowing for Jeremiah to be the Jeremy Fitzgerald of this movie. I made the Wizards the same as the classics because it just simplifies it a lot. I don't like how the movie had 3 different sets of animatronics crammed in and barely left room to make them individually relevant, so I just couldn't justify doing it that way. I think the inclusion and plot relevance of FazFest feels much smoother and more fitting here because it was able to combine it with being the reason Abby finds the Faz Talker instead of it being retconned into an item that was apparently at the pizzeria and won the whole time. Charlotte possessing Abby doesn't inherently alter her appearance, being a thing that can just be toggled, and happens for the majority of the plot, which does remove Lisa being possessed, but I just love the horror trope of creepy possessed children and I'm allowed to make a change for no other reason than thinking it's cool, sue me. Henry tells Mike he was William's business partner when he meets him instead of it being a post-credits thing because I see no reason to hide that information, especially when you do plan to reveal that information but only after everyone has left the theater and there's like maybe 10 people watching. I really like the reveal of there being this line of missing children that's leading to Mike's house because of the sudden realization that something dreadful is heading directly for you. They did this in the Twisted ones when they realized the Twisted animatronics are heading for Charlie's dorm, and that is one of my favorite moments of that book, so I really wanted that here. Things like Charlotte and Abby's body looming over Vanessa in her bed while she sleeps, and all the children sleeping in the music box are shots I envisioned in my mind first, and are only really in the story because of how cool they looked inside my head. Sometimes you think of a cool looking thing and it's just gotta be in there. And of course, I gave Mike and Jeremiah an actual arc and reason to be friends, given that they bonded over surviving the attack of murderous animatronics together. Yay! What I like about how I've reworked the story overall is that I gave it an actual parent theme, being one of the past coming back to haunt you, both metaphorically and literally. I created this sort of triality between the three main characters, Vanessa being a conduit for William and his plan, Abby being a conduit for his victims and their plan, and Mike being caught in the middle as the subject who has been blamed for the actions of both parties. Like I said before though, I don't think this rewrite is perfect, and I wanted to list a few issues I still have with it. I do think the five-night structure makes it feel wonkier than it should be. Again, it was really just me experimenting to see if it would even work, but it's possible an absolutely ideal rewrite would not have that. This perimeter lock stuff still feels kinda nonsensical to me, but I wanted to throw away as little as possible from the original movie. They didn't think much about how it actually works, and neither did I. I'm not fully satisfied with how Henry is incorporated here. He kind of just gives exposition and feels like much more of a plot device than a character, but I wanted to mirror the scene of Mike meeting him at his house, otherwise I would probably just scrap that entirely and completely rethink his relevance. I wish I could have made FazFest relevant again at the end where one of the toys walks through and the cosplays mess with their facial scanning, but it didn't really fit in at that point, and I couldn't exactly do it earlier either. My absolute biggest issue is that I could not come up with a good reason for Jeremiah continuing to work at Freddy's aside from him just being convinced he's not in any real danger, which feels pretty stupid. And overall, like Henry, his role in this plot is not really necessary for any narrative reason, but I really wanted a Jeremy Fitzgerald in this movie, so I just had to force it. I cannot wrap my mind around how the script for FNAF 2 turned out the way it did. I know sometimes you're in a rush and you're writing some stuff and you're kind of having to force it and it's not perfect, which is what happened to me, but I at least cared about making sure it wasn't left with like 20 plot holes. And I made that in like a week. I can't imagine this script was finalized in a time frame like that, but at this point if you told me it was, I might genuinely believe you. It feels like it had no revisions, like it was still just a draft. This draft even. A frame of reference I like to use is if the main idea of your story can be summarized in one sentence. And then I realized that I have no idea what the main idea of this movie even is. It doesn't really have a focal point. The first movies would be something like, a man named Mike is forced to take a night security job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in order to keep custody of his younger sister. This is the basic setup that everything else follows. Same with my rewrite, which could be summarized like, Abby is swept up into new nightmare after wanting to prove her brother innocent for the events that transpired in the first film. That's the setup. It's a sequel that is following the first movie with Mike having been blamed for something he didn't do, thus Abby attempting to prove him innocent is what kicks off everything else. But when it comes to the plot of the actual sequel, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Even the actual summary of the movie can't do it in one sentence, and what it does summarize barely touches what the real plot or setup is. I don't know how Mike hiding anything from Abby is plot relevant if this is not an issue beyond the first 20 minutes, not to mention Charlotte's awakening was unrelated and hell would have broken loose regardless, so I personally don't think it even belongs in the summary. If I tried to do it, it would have to be something like Abby misses her animatronic friends and ends up discovering an even older pizzeria which Vanessa knew about, and her friend Charlotte died there, and Mike... Okay, forget Michael. What role does Mike even ultimately have here? To just get mad at Vanessa? All he does other than that is manage to sever Charlotte's connection, but you know, Vanessa knew her way around the computer and probably could have done it faster than Mike did. Wow, even the main protagonist is actually pointless in this narrative. Anyways, where was I? Oh, the plot summary. Yeah, I give up. It's way too unfocused and cannot decide on which element is the most important to its setup. Is it Abby being tricked by the animatronics? Vanessa, who is being confronted by her past? Mike, who is supposed to be the main character but has no real reason to be here? You could hypothetically actually have him go to jail at the start and the rest is just Abby and Vanessa as the main characters, and it can almost play out the same. Vanessa could go to meet Henry before confronting Charlotte. You could write in a bit of plot armor that Vanessa can break herself out of the cubbyhole and then breaks the wireless connection to the animatronics and goes to rescue Abby. Like, fuck it, we should have just had Vanessa as the main character. Then maybe the plot could become a little more focused and you could hone in on a summary like, Vanessa suddenly finds herself as the caretaker of Abby when Mike becomes unavailable, but has a hard time living up to the job when secrets from her past begin to resurface. Seriously, there are probably a million ways you can redo this plot that just work better. And sometimes it doesn't even take more than a few minutes to conceptualize them.
For the majority of its lifespan, a lot of FNAF's story has not actually been shown on screen. This is why people naturally fill those gaps on their own and come up with their own ideas and headcanons. People enjoyed Michael Afton as a character, despite there barely even being a character there, because it was the idea of him that was so compelling. People enjoyed this idea of the protagonist being the killer son who was trying to redeem himself and put an end to his father and the tragedies he's caused, even though the games themselves barely actually allude to that being the case at all. Ultimately, the holes in FNAF's plot only served to make its story more interesting because it alluded, potentially by accident, to such narratively captivating ideas which people naturally gravitated towards. But the movie does not have those gaps. The movie has to present you with more direct storytelling, showing events exactly as they happen, showing how characters actually behave and think, and sometimes that just doesn't live up to what people already had in their heads. And I'm fine with finally being given answers whether I like them or not, but I would like to know for a fact if they actually are answers. I would like to know what information can be applied where before I decide something is concrete, make it the foundation of what I believe, and then have that all ripped away in the next installment in this franchise, sacrificing any semblance of a story direction for the sake of theory fodder.
What's the point of theorizing in FNAF anymore? People have spent so much time and effort analyzing the games, books, and films to come up with explanations for the million mysteries within this series. I distinctly remember that when FNAF 2 came out, it was heavily implied that the withered animatronics were the same as the classics and were therefore possessed by the same set of spirits. Evidence for this could be found in the ending newspaper, which stated that the old animatronics were being kept in hopes of reorganization of the company, the fact that the old animatronics were said to smell bad in both FNAF 1 and 2, the fact that the withered animatronics were simply called Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, and Scott Cawthon's own admission that MatPat's theory about the game got almost everything right. Now, ever since this movie came out, a myriad of YouTubers have claimed that it answers so many questions about the second game, and I'm just sitting here like, did we really have any of these questions? These YouTubers are now saying that this movie shows the Wizards are not the same entities as the classics, and not only that, but they're not possessed by the missing children. These are two things that have been established for over a decade, and I'm supposed to just, hand wave them away? People spent a lot of time and effort analyzing FNAF 2 when it came out, and Scott himself pretty much said that people solved it. But I guess not anymore. I guess Scott just decided to retcon the game for whatever reason. If this is true, it raises the biggest and reddest of flags. If anything can happen, if information isn't solid, and if intent is this malleable, then theorizing is meaningless. All the time and energy spent analyzing this franchise in the hopes of being validated for your passion becomes worthless. Scott Cawthon can intend a certain idea, he can allude heavily to it, but he can also stop short of outright confirming it. So if he ever wants to change his mind, people can go, see, it was never confirmed, so it's not a retcon. This series was built on solving a mystery. But if there's no solid intent, there is no mystery, and this series fails at the one thing it was set out to do.
I think it is valid for people to complain about their quote-unquote headcanons getting debunked when almost every single new installment does this and forces you to completely rethink your whole understanding of the most basic stuff. That is not how stories should work. We shouldn't still be debating the role of the main protagonist after it's been more than a decade. We should not be going back to revise everything we thought we knew about the second game in the entire series, which was released more than 11 years ago. At this point, I never want to hear the word lore ever again. Yeah, I'm tired of it. If you look at my channel, I've made maybe 2 FNAF theories in total. The rest of the time, I'm always focused on trying to show people why I think FNAF has an actual narrative that is worth analyzing. At least I thought it was worth analyzing. But is all that time and effort and passion really worth it? If we'll never get a sign that the story matters to the actual creator nearly as much as it matters to me? So is there a way to fix this issue? Well, I think there is a step 1. I think we need answers. Just straight up, definitively, and without room for debate, without being framed as content to make theory videos on, we need to know for sure how both the movies and books can be applied to the games and what their relationship with each other is. We need to have a solid foundation that other theories can be built on top of instead of the foundation itself being a theory. And maybe it won't fix some people being dissatisfied with the story, but it will fix FNAF not even having a story. I mean, okay, there are times when it tries to have a story. I like a lot of the books. I like the story of the first movie. And in fact, I wish those things were valued a lot more as standalone entries than always having to be searched through for game lore or references. But FNAF is feeding into that kind of a mindset and does not value what those stories had meant just as a piece of writing. And that's ultimately what my issue is. I like analyzing the writing of FNAF. I want to keep talking about it. I just like a sign that it's actually worth it. Those are my thoughts on the state of modern FNAF. I will probably continue being a fan for the foreseeable future. I just hope that some of these issues can improve. I'm not feeling super positive about that, but I hope so. This video became way bigger and way longer than I had ever expected, and I'm editing it in a new program which I'm not even slightly used to yet, so I have no idea how long it will take before it's out. My goal was before New Year's, but who knows if that happens. If you've watched this far, thank you. This is the most effort I've put into a video yet, and I consider it to be the most important one on my channel. If you don't agree with what I've said in this video, that's fine. I think the beauty of humanity is that everyone is different, and the beauty of having a YouTube channel is that you can upload why your opinion differs from everyone else and then get yelled at for it. Anyways, that's all for now. See you again when I upload in probably another 6 or so months. I don't know, I don't have a consistent upload schedule. I don't need one. I don't consider myself to be a YouTuber. I do this for fun and at complete random. But yeah. Anyways, I guess.
Hey guys, I said that I would be back later. You are about to get owned by the Blaninator.